this is Phil. Welcome back to the show. I am here with Sky Jitani.
Hi, Phil.
Hi, Sky. How are you?
I'm just great.
You're just gray.
8.
Hey, you're
Yeah.
gray. We talked about the colors that you're wearing.
He's got a fashion fetish.
One of us is always bright.
That would be me.
People listening right now don't know who you're talking to.
I'm talking to Sky Jitani. And now I'm talking to Christian Taylor. Hi, Christian Taylor.
Hi, Phil.
We're sharing a mic again because we actually have a guest, and we're doing a four thing on 3 mics, like the Cowboys used to do
So I'm not going to talk very much.
in the bunkhouse days.
Yeah.
Christian is pretty in
Orange.
No.
salmon.
This
Salmon.
is not salmon.
Peach. Pretty
this
in
is
peach.
Orange.
It's like you're fishing for salmon too. You got like a fishing vest
David,
going on
what-
there.
Do I? Yeah.
What
I
color
kinda
is
do.
that?
It's salmon.
Oh gosh.
Aha!
All right.
And we have a guest because Sky was hanging around in New York a couple weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and bumped into a guy in one of the seedier parts of Times Square outside the Disney store.
That's not the story I told him.
I don't know.
But you know, if you just randomly picked any New Yorker to come and be on this podcast, it would probably be interesting. So
Really?
it could work.
So you're promising that this is going to be interesting.
I make no
I
promises.
don't know. He just got off a plane. He's really late. He's probably super tired.
Okay, David Gungor is here. Hi, David.
Hi, Phil. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
Do I need to lean in this close? Do I need to look at the camera?
You don't have to look at the camera. No, just never let your gaze leave me. Even if Sky is talking to you,
Okay.
just
Okay.
stay locked
You're
in.
Don't
piercing
listen to
brown.
him.
Fix your eyes on Phil.
Fix your-
And
let's
throw
make-
off the sin that
theme
so
song.
easily entangles.
Hey, it's a podcast. What do you know? Hey, it's a podcast. And we got video. Hey, we used to say, and there's no video, and then but then we had video, and then we had to change it.
Got it.
Hey, it's a podcast. We'll still end it here. The Phil Vischer podcast starts right here. We'll talk to Sky.
Hi, Phil.
Hi, Sky. And Christian too.
Hi, Phil.
And we've
He's not very good at the ukulele.
we've got a guest. It's Dave Gungor. He's a musician, and this is making me very nervous because I'm not. Dave Gungor's here for you. Hi, Dave Gungor.
Hello.
Hey, it's a podcast. What's your favorite VeggieTales character? Do you have one? Did you grow up on VeggieTales? Have you ever seen VeggieTales?
I have seen VeggieTales.
You
I
have
have
a favorite
kids
character?
that love VeggieTales.
Okay. Favorite character?
I'm gonna go with Larry.
I figured. Okay. Hey, it's a podcast.
That's one voice he doesn't do.
Fisher podcast starts right here. The Phil Fisher podcast starts right here.
Is that insulting?
Well,
I've-
actually, after I asked that question, I thought he was going to say Larry. I just knew he was going to say Larry, and that's okay.
Listen, it's only Larry because when I hear Bob say, "Hey, Larry,"
Hey, Larry.
exactly.
Hi, Larry. This is Bob the Tomato.
So
but
that's
what
why-
about Mr. Lunt? Isn't Mr. Lunt a little more, New York?
Yeah.
A little more, hey, would you like to buy a watch?
I only
Hey.
could remember Bob and Larry, so I went with Larry, but I like Mr.
Okay.
Lund.
50-50 chance.
You have kids?
I have 4
How
kids.
old? How old?
6 years old, first grade. Twins who are 4,
Ooh.
and they are not yet in pre-K,
Okay.
so they're at home right now.
Okay.
And then 9-month-old.
Okay. And will there be more? Are you
No.
going for reality
Shop is closed.
level
No.
procreation, or no? You're
No.
done. That's it.
Highway is closed.
The gate is down.
Yeah.
Well, you guys also live in...
Time out.
What?
Just time out. Can we
Yeah.
please explain who David is before we start?
David Gungor is one of the famous singing Gungors.
Yes. Okay. Is he the?
He has a band called The Brilliance.
Yes.
Ding.
Thank you.
How many albums?
A lot.
I didn't do that.
Wow.
I
What do you mean a
knew
lot of albums?
lot.
Like
well,
30?
we have one. So we just released an album
Called?
called Brother in February,
Okay.
and it's our first major release, meaning it's released all around, and you can find it. in
Okay.
Stores and that kind
So
of
the
thing.
Is it
other-
on iTunes?
The other, yes.
The other ones were.
The other
out
ones
of
were
your
all out of my
station
little
wagon?
station wagon that
Yeah.
I recorded in a van by the river.
Yeah.
But it was a station wagon by the river.
But those were really good albums.
those are
Yeah.
thank you. So we did 6 in like 3 years, which is not a good business plan.
That's
But
a lot of
we were
albums.
just like, we're gonna do this.
You kept forgetting to push the stop on the
Exactly.
recorder. It's
Exactly.
Like,
So-
oops, we've got.
But your band is like all over the country.
Yes.
You guys aren't
So-
centrally.
So it's really the Brilliance is it is a band. It's myself and my best friend John Arndt. So we grew up together in central Wisconsin. Our dads were in a wedding band in the 70s.
No. Oh, man.
Our first band.
Wisconsin wedding bands in the 70s.
Yeah,
That
you know,
immediately
it's-
They
brings
didn't play at
something
like
to
supper
mind.
clubs and things up in Wisconsin.
You know this. I like that you said supper clubs. The first musical live experience I think I had was at a supper club called the Belvedere.
That's a
In
supper.
central
It
Wisconsin.
just sounds like it. Yeah.
And so our first band together with John and I was when we were about 7 years old, called the Rockin' Jammers. And
The
our
Rockin' Jammers.
The Rockin' Jammers.
What,
I
did
played
you
bass.
Consider the Jammin' Rockers at any
No,
point?
Rockin' Jammers. I played bass. John played piano. Our hit song was called Jubilee.
Okay.
And we recorded it on tape, and people would laugh when we played it back, and we thought they were just like laughing out of excitement.
Yeah.
It was actually because back then I could sing quite high, and we just rocked one word. It was literally one lyric the entire song, Jubilee.
Jubilee.
You can sing high
Over and
now.
over. Yeah, but I mean, it was
can't
just
imagine then.
Jubilee over and over.
Huh.
And then
And you were thinking that was
we thought it was a
pretty
hit.
good idea.
We thought it was a hit
the time?
And then I moved in middle school from central Wisconsin to Tulsa, Oklahoma, because my dad
Yeah.
was a pastor and started a church in Tulsa.
Okay.
Which Tulsa needed a lot more churches, I'm sure you know.
Then Wisconsin. Yeah.
Sort of
that
like
makes
Wheaton.
Exactly.
sense.
Yeah. So then we moved to Tulsa, and John and I remained friends all throughout the years. And then in college, I took a job up at a church in West Michigan while I went to college and led
Okay.
worship for this church. And John also ended up in the same area, so we were roommates.
Okay.
We started a band called the Brilliance and the Flyer, which was just a pop
The
band.
Flyer. Okay.
Wh-
It's like
Whereas
we
one
were
of you the
making
Brilliance and the other the Flyer? Or
No,
what?
my brother Rob was the flyer because he had to fly in for the shows. But he actually came up with the band name. Rob did. We just liked it. And then when we made our first record, which is a story in itself of like the reason why we made it was we did not plan to have a band, but I was in Carnegie Hall because my brother-in-law is a great cellist. He's like a world-renowned cellist. So
Sure.
my wife
And
and,
his
I.
name is?
Joshua Roman.
Okay.
You can go ahead and plug that bell.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So
Google him.
yeah. So my wife's a great violinist. We were watching Joshua in Carnegie Hall, and I thought I like noticed all the music that I was playing at that point. I was playing for another band that has my last name called Gunger.
How ironic.
I wondered
Yep.
about
So my
that.
brother Michael and his wife Lisa have a band called Gunger, and I was playing bass in that, and John, the other guy in my band, was playing keys in it. So, New York City, I'm in Carnegie Hall, and I'm watching my brother-in-law shred some Bach, and I noticed that like all
Which
of
would
us,
be another good name
which
for
would-
your Wisconsin band.
yes,
Shred-
shredding
Bach
Bach.
shredder.
Yes, was the second choice. So we were sitting down in Carnegie Hall, and I noticed that like everyone was on the edge of their seats, like watching this thing, and we were all quiet. And there was something about everyone listening together that it was this type of musical experience that was so intense, and yet very intimate. And
Okay.
I thought about all of my music playing, and especially within church world, where like the entire point growing up of like music in church, especially if you're like playing in the band, is usually to have, in my own Christianese little world, we would call it like the music was really anointed, which just meant, in layman's terms, like you really had this sense of awe or wonder. And oftentimes that came when the band would like sing a chorus over and over and then like build, and then everyone would be like, oh man, like the music was really anointed.
Right, that's when the Holy Spirit showed up.
Oh, yeah.
Was when you modulated.
Exactly. So
Because nothing provokes the Holy Spirit
like a modulation.
like a modulation after the bridge.
I know. So
David knew that.
I know.
He did that with the Psalms.
I know.
Okay.
So
Just so we're on the same page.
we're on that. So after especially like half step modulation. The Shekinah is like halfway there. Full step modulation.
Yeah, full
Full
glory.
Shekinah.
Full Shekinah.
So-
Rock, that's it, which is another good name for your band.
Full
Full
Shekinah?
Shekinah.
That was our third choice
Yeah,
for a band name.
okay.
So
Is that like my Sharota?
That's Sharona.
I know.
So in Carnegie Hall, I'm there. The
Yes.
music that I had been playing to up to this point, specifically for church, would always be like the let's take some like melody.
Right.
Let's play that melody over and over and build over that melody. And so a lot of bands do this. Like if you great arena sound, like
Yep.
a lot of times it's the same chords over and over. Like I
Yep.
still haven't found what I'm looking
'Cause it
for or whatever.
works.
Because it works.
'Cause it works.
It works. Same thing with like Sigur Rós.
So why do you want to mess with something
I know,
that
I know.
works?
So what
Sigur
was
Rós-
different about
Well,
what
so
you...
here's what I'm gonna say.
Trying to get
I'm
there.
trying to get there,
Alright.
but I'm getting
So
there.
Bach
Thank you.
is being shredded
So
by your
hold the
brother-in-law.
phone. Hold the phone. So Sigur Rós will take like a musical idea, like a melody.
Who?
Sigur Rós, like a great band. They'll take a melody and they'll play this melody over and over, and you'll build on this melody. And it's the same thing like if you've ever seen like in Africa where they'll have the people that are doing the jumping up and
Yeah.
down and like chanting.
Right.
You can work your way into a trance where you're
Right.
like doing the same thing over and
Right.
over and work your way into a trance. Well,
Are you saying Christian music is pagan?
Let him
I'm
finish.
I'm saying-
I'm right with you.
thank you.
Keep
I'm
going.
saying that that's a great form of music. However, if that's
Yes.
the only form of music you have, in a sense, wow, I'm about to go here. Sorry, I'm about to go here. But
No,
in a
go
sense,
for it.
it becomes like,
We can edit this out.
yeah, I probably should. I'm not going to say it.
No. Please, no, say it.
It becomes like musical masturbation, where like you have
I can't
to.
believe you said
No,
that.
I know. Well, in a sense, what
with
happens?
you.
No
well,
wonder you're not on K-Love.
I know. Well, what I'm saying is this.
That was not safe for the whole family.
I'm sorry. Well, I'm saying this.
We'll beep it.
No, we won't.
Next time he says maybe I shouldn't go there, let's agree with him.
Well, I'm saying this. The first time, like, your children, it's here's the deal. If I'm only having a musical experience where every single
Yes.
time it has to be greater than the last,
Right.
and it always has to just be this emotional experience where it's like, always like, well, did it build as much as the last time it
amazing
built? Then
crescendo.
all
Yeah.
that I do is like become so focused on this moment
Right.
that really is not about the people and leading these people, but just this musical moment that is based solely on my own personal experience of emotional hype.
Right.
Okay? And I don't think that's very fruitful.
Okay.
It also seems self-focused and self-gratifying,
Right.
Yes.
not worshiping the divine.
Yes.
Right.
Well, I think it starts out from a place of worship
Yes.
divine, so I don't want to like say that that's all bad. I think it's good, and I still experience those moments of trying to build a song and have that. But I'm saying if all your focus is in order for the like little equation to
A
work
recipe.
for, oh, this was an amazing worship experience. Is
Yeah.
you got to build, you have to have
Do you know
this
what
thing.
that used to be? Like before worship music, before contemporary worship music, it was cantatas. Did you ever sit through cantatas as a kid, or were you already, that was already gone?
I was in the Keith Green /
Okay, yeah.
which I love.
Yes.
Like
Keith Green was leading us out of the cantata.
It was
Yeah.
my first concert.
yeah,
Because
I loved
would
it.
go like, okay, my great grandfather started a Bible conference in Iowa, and we were there every year. And Northwestern College in Minneapolis, which is now the University of Northwestern, not to be confused with Northwestern University in Chicago. The president of that college was also their director of choirs, and he would direct the choir at the Okoboji Lakes Bible Missionary Conference every year, Dr. Bernstein. And they would put on this massive conference choir because that's what you did. And every Friday was cantata night. It was like the last Friday of the conference, they would put on a cantata and they would practice it the whole week. Do you know what a cantata is, Sky?
I thought
'Cause
that's-
you look confused.
I'm just thinking of Italian
It's
food
sort
for
of
some
like
reason.
Hallelujah chorus.
It's
The
a mini musical.
I'm thinking of
It's a-
frittata. That's my problem.
It's a choir musical.
It's like
It's
you
like
take the
10
whole
songs.
Hallelujah chorus. What's that whole thing called with all of the different songs?
Movement.
You talking about Handel's Messiah?
Yes, that's what I mean. I'm
Is
sorry.
your hair
Yes,
blue?
it's
Or
like
is it-
Handel's
no, that's the
Messiah.
light. Wow, I actually thought you
look
dyed
like
your hair
blue
blue.
hair?
Wow,
No.
that's cool. So, and,
It's like that.
and every cantata that they picked, how much the audience liked it depended on how many massive crescendos there were at
So
the ends
okay,
of
so we
each
train
song.
ourselves.
It's worship junkies.
We
Yeah.
train ourselves to have like that dopamine hit, you know,
Yeah.
and that's what I mean by
Yes.
it gets to a place where we get addicted to the dopamine hit, and then
Mm-hmm.
the problem is we're not actually focused on what does it mean to develop spiritually.
Right.
Right.
It just means, what does it mean to get a dopamine
We're looking
hit?
for musical cues.
Yeah,
like
so
when the drummer starts to do
exactly.
this.
So here was my problem.
Okay.
I'm sitting in the hall.
Yes, you're in
And
Carnegie
I
Hall,
noticed that
and they're doing a cantata?
No. I noticed that every form of music that I played currently was a formula specifically in church to get a dopamine hit, more so than even focused on the music or anything like that, because here we were, and I noticed that we were all leaning into the music, having this experience, and we were all quiet, which I love. Everyone, let's sing over and over, and let's sing really loudly together. It's a great experience. But it also can breed a little bit of like the mob experience or the big like
the group thing.
The group thing of like we're all in a stadium and like here we go, like
Promise Keepers.
Yeah, well, Green Bay Pack. I'm a big Packers fan. Probably
Packers.
Bears. Whatever that is. Yeah.
Right.
Which I'm totally cool with. I'm totally cool
Green
with like
Bay
the
Packers
yes high fives
versus Promise Keepers. Who wins?
Green Bay Packers.
Oh.
Well, they're God's team. So sorry. So
I'll pretend I didn't hear
I'm
that
just
as a
joking.
Bears fan.
So I'm in this hall
You're
and I
Carnegie
think
Hall.
about I'm reading like everything that I am being
You're an
inspired
observer
by.
in some ways, and in another way, you're
I'm a
probably right
participant.
there and participating.
You're listening and participating together.
Are you
And,
having an out of body experience?
I
Are
am,
you, like,
and
seeing
this is-
yourself
here's-
and floating
here's what
above the room.
Let
Yes.
the guy finish.
Here's what I'm experiencing. I'm experiencing that everything that I'm reading and that I grew up with in like a prayer and worship thing was from a very classic Pentecostal, evangelical, this is what I need to do. And what I was reading was a lot of different authors about prayer, from Richard Rohr to Henry Nouwen and Mother Teresa, that were more
Contemplative.
yes, and more about learning to listen to God, which one of the things that I wasn't very good at the time, but really was drawn to was like when I first met my wife, we would go out on a date, and I would constantly try to entertain her. So I wanted to like talk all the time or make jokes, and if it was silent, I felt like maybe this is a bad date.
Right.
So I'd have
right.
to talk all the time.
Silence is a failure. Of some
4
kind.
years, or 4 children later, not 4 years later. 4 children later, 8 years of marriage. When we have a silent dinner, it's a beautiful thing. We don't have to talk all the time. If we're in the car and it's quiet, we cherish those moments of just being together. And part of that is learning how to be together more than just like learning how to entertain or do that. And for me, specifically working in the church world, writing music for the church, I knew how to entertain, and I knew how to get the dopamine hit of like the science of how do you write a worship song. But I didn't know how to let people be and receive, and from a musical standpoint, even learn how to listen. Because oftentimes in church music, I'm asking you to do. And I'm never asking you to receive.
Right.
And so that's a beautiful thing in music that oftentimes, it's beauty in particular. Not everyone can play
So
a
how
violin
long
thing.
did
So-
you lead worship in church?
So I grew
before
up
this
leading
experience?
worship in church. So I was probably about 22 years old.
And when you started adjusting how you were leading worship based on this learning, how did people react?
So this is what happened. So I'm a youth pastor at this time. I lead worship, and in our church, we were starting to dive. We were a classic evangelical church that over about 10 years really started to dive into liturgy and rhythms like the church calendar and those types of things, and learning how to be quiet and listen to God.
And is this in Western Michigan?
This was in actually in Oklahoma.
Okay.
Okay.
So
There's liturgy in Oklahoma?
there is. So at this time, I called John. I wasn't trying to play in a band or anything, and I said, "Hey,
Your childhood friend John.
my childhood friend John, who
Okay.
we had another band with." I
Not
called
the
him and
flyer,
I said,
the
Right,
other Brilliant.
Right.
Okay.
So I said, John, I was like, I just was in Carnegie Hall. I want to write some music for my church that is based around a string quartet that people can sit and listen to. But it's all based around like everything that we are doing right now. So he's like, that'd be fun. He was in Austin, Texas, finishing his degree in Austin at the University of Texas. And so we got together halfway from Tulsa and Austin, which was Denton, Texas, and there was a studio there. We got a great string quartet, and we wrote the string music first, which
Is
usually...
Denton known for its string quartets?
Denton is actually a great music town.
Really?
Specifically for jazz music, but
Really?
really great music town and a great music school in North Texas. So
You know.
So
Learn something every day.
Yeah. So
So you met.
so we met. We recorded the strings first, which usually when you're like doing a pop record, you record like a rhythm section
Right.
first, and you have these songs written, and the songs are usually mostly written. Ours were like ideas, and then we would write these string parts, and then from that I'd kind of work out the lyrics, and we did strings first, which is kind of an unconventional way to
Yes, it
record.
is.
So then from there we made the first record, and
Which is called?
just the Brilliance. It was just called the Brilliance, and it was not meant to be a band at first. The only reason why we didn't want to call it David Gungor because John wrote all the string parts, co-wrote mostly everything with me, so we knew it was something more than us. But it started that way, and then over time it evolved to where after the first record we made our money back and we had some money. We were like, well, let's just make another record.
Let's keep going.
So that's why we did that many
Another-
records
back to Denton?
quickly. So
Back
we
to
went back
Denton?
to Denton and went to Colorado Springs to another friend's basement and recorded. So we would
Okay.
do those first records. There were EPs where we would do something like we'd record a full record in like 4 days, and we would just go with like little song ideas. And then my wife plays violin. One of our best friends is a great cellist. And from there, met some amazing musicians throughout the years, that it kind of became a collective to where we have now musicians, usually for each, whenever we're playing, like tonight we're playing in Chicago. And this is actually a small band for us, and it's a string quartet. It's John, myself, I play a couple different instruments, and then a drummer. But this weekend we're playing in LA with a full symphony. And then, so we can
How do you
it.
set that up?
So
You say,
we've-
I'm David Gungor, I need a symphony.
So
And they say,
how we do that is a
"Right
lot of
away,
times
Mr. Gunger."
schools like universities. So we've done this at multiple universities where we love to be able to say to their music departments like, hey, if you have an orchestra, we will we'll write for this. So John is a great arranger. We'll arrange our music to where we have it. Or we can do up to 50 musicians easily or more. So. Oftentimes for different concerts, every time you see us, it'll be depending on the venue and depending on the thing, it'll be different. It's always me and John, and then we kind of have our A team and then our other teams that are A1, A2, A3.
Right, they're all A. And
They're all A in my heart. And
So
yeah,
how did this? Okay, so at the same time, your brother is doing
Michael, yes.
Yeah, Michael is doing Gunger, and that seems like he's also having some of these same thoughts of
So Gunger went through its own evolution.
deconstructing
Yeah,
worship
so-
music.
So Brilliance's main focus was, at first, was specifically writing music. It's really funny because I don't ever call ourselves like a worship band,
Okay,
and yet, and when we first
what do you
started,
call yourselves?
Yeah, it's funny. So like we're a band and we write music around the church calendar. So we
Okay.
write music for the church, but it's around a narrative, and that's why
You're a liturgical band.
we are, but what we do is like we try to write music that, like if I was saying specifically worship band for music today, I would first of all be like, I'm gonna be the person that's like, well, worship music, like you probably worship to whatever record like really moved you whenever you were falling in love with music. Beauty, if it belongs to God, is God. So I'm not gonna try to define something as worship and something as not.
Right.
Congregational worship settings.
What about worship service?
So
music?
worship, yeah. So if you're like a congregational worship service, what's funny is for our band, I don't even try to write congregationally like I have to have you sing. No, I don't need to. We're writing specifically around a narrative.
Don't people get confused?
Well, that's sort of my question is when you began introducing this and it doesn't fit the mold of what people have come to expect, how do they react? I mean, obviously you're still doing
So
it and you're
When
making
do I
it.
sing?
So
In which part do I
there,
sing?
there are times where certain songs, like if I took our first record, certain songs we would sing specifically on a Sunday morning. And then there were certain songs that I specifically wrote for something like Ash Wednesday, or specifically wrote for Good Friday, or specifically wrote around the church calendar, things like Advent music that we wanted them to be able to listen to be able to sit and listen, to be sung over. And there's certain times where we want you to sing. A lot of our music is very simple and almost like chant form. It has now evolved to where our new record is something different than the first record.
Okay.
in the approach
More big
and for
crescendos?
how things. They do have
More
some more big
modulations?
crescendos and more modulations. However, the first, like, each record has its own story and own little narrative that fits into a meta-narrative. For Brother, it has a story of itself, which the major theme of Brother is one of reconciliation. And there are certain, when we wrote it, there are certain things that I find that if you look at the, like, music history, some of the greatest pieces of art were commissioned. So, like, we're speaking about Bach, like, we're commissioned by the church. And yet classical music now will play it in any venue, and you don't think, well, this is a church song.
Right.
It was commissioned by the church, and great art can be commissioned by the church. So our hope is that Brother was something that specifically, like, I still am a pastor and work at a church. And a lot of Brother was commissioned in a sense of, like, where we're living, themes of, like, what we're actually dealing with.
Okay.
So it starts off with a big theme of reconciliation, of how I view the other. And so a lot of that was brought on by different trips through traveling. I visited Israel and Palestine and was very shaped by that narrative of peacemaking. And I find that these themes that specifically are in Brother are themes that can, for me, the language of love and reconciliation I'm able to speak from is from a Christian narrative. However, it's a narrative that's also found in a lot of other religions and even non-religion. That's a very human narrative. And for me, that resonates with us because when we see Jesus, we see not only the heart of God, but we see what it means to fully be human.
Right.
And so that can kind of transcend just Christian boxes.
Okay.
And so that's what our hope is for our music, is that it
So
can transcend that.
That can make it tricky, though, to get a record deal in the Christian music business if you're transcending boxes all the time. Have you found that to be the case?
So when we first started, we would get contacted by record labels, all very kind, that would be like, we love this. This is awesome. This is so different. We don't know what to do with you. And my brother Michael really paved the way. I didn't go into their story. Their story more of they were making music for the church, but then wanted to go more into beauty and leave like necessarily like Christian scene. And so for us, he kind of had paved a way along with some other bands. We were a little more focused on the liturgical nature of things and writing for the church. And then seeing how on that journey, it kept on leading us to the other and writing music that inspired us and how we wanted to live. So like if we wanted someone to, like John will often say, like if we knew that someone was going to be singing a song in church, oftentimes language that is it's meant for good can sometimes become divisive. So for instance, if I'm singing, our God is greater, our God is better, our God is stronger, it becomes very much our God versus your God, right?
Okay.
It becomes tribal.
And even in the nature of like, even though that's good-hearted, and I'm not like trying to blame anyone for writing that, I think it's a good song for people to sing. There were certain songs that I had even written that had become, in a sense, divisive, even though I was trying to be inclusive. And so we wanted to say, in which ways can those like walls kind of be torn down?
Okay.
And so like a song like Brother says, when I look into the face of my enemy, I see my brother. If you're a Christian or if you're a Muslim or if you're a Buddhist, I feel like that's a truth that transcends. And yet I find that truth based in the teachings of Jesus as a Christian.
Okay, so as a non-musician and as a preacher primarily, it gets really frustrating over the years when you pour your energy into teaching scripture or preaching or whatever, and then it dawns on you that the majority of people that you've been speaking to for years and years in your own church are having their theology shaped far more by what they hear in Christian music than what they hear in your sermons week after week. And it's been this way for centuries. Music has been the transmitter of truth. So, two questions in that. What do you think is the state of Christian music when it comes to its depth or the ability to bring us into a contemplative communion with God? And secondly, how do you determine how to communicate the truths that you are communicating. I mean, you already mentioned not wanting to be divisive, but what else informs you, knowing that your songs are going to shape the hearts and souls of the people who engage them?
So first question was, what is the state of Christian music?
Pretty good, huh?
Yeah, I mean,
being sarcastic.
It depends on.
Well, the fact that you and your brother's band and others are gaining more and more momentum means something's happening.
Yeah, and I would say, well, one, there are more Christians who than we named that are making amazing music, but oftentimes aren't called Christian artists.
That's
So,
for
for instance, I just saw an amazing show. I just saw Sufjan Stevens play in Brooklyn on Saturday night, and it was this amazing, transcendent show of beauty. And his whole record is straight up like Christian record, and you don't often call him Christian.
Right.
There are a lot of people that I would almost I would say have a very like biblical, prophetic voice that are like kind of the deconstructive post-Christian artists like Father John Misty or David Bazan.
Father John Misty.
Who are
What's that?
unbelievable artists right now
Name
that are
some
making
other ones.
music.
Yeah, I want to write that down.
They had the type of experience that was like very classic to millennials who had some form of, I think, what they would call spiritual abuse. Now, this is like very exaggerated, but things like, I know I've read from Father John Misty that when he was a kid, he went to a Christian private school and they were doing the revival type thing. And if you weren't falling down and shaking in the blanket over you, like it really messed with him of his whole idea of what God is. And those things shaped him. And all of us are shaped by trauma. That's our worldview that's how we are formed, is trauma. And so when I see Father John Misty, when I hear David Bazan, different artists, my heart breaks and I feel like it really informs. It like is prophetic and it informs us of like where we're at right now. When I hear artists like Sufjan Stevens, when I hear different artists like Sleeping at Last, Ryan is an amazing songwriter that's like having incredible success with all types of music, and he's a Christian guy that like I know so many great artists that are Christians that are doing amazing music and having incredible succs.
But they're not
within the
labeled
music
that way.
industry.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there are people that have transcended. I mean, like even if you're going to talk like guys like Ben Rector or guys like if I was gonna Need to Breathe, like they're having incredible success.
And how
In
are
the
they?
music industry, and they're Christians that even on their records have certain songs that are Christian songs.
How are they getting out there?
They are out there. Just
How did they get out there?
They
the next generation,
They were
how's it
very
gonna
well.
work?
So here's what I think. I think that. So I would call that Christian music. So I wouldn't. So I'd be like, what is the state of Christian music? I'd be like, for the most part, it's very exciting. It's great. I think it's great. If you're going to talk about contemporary Christian music, that is a little subcategory of Christian music in general.
Okay.
So when I look at Christian music, I think I look at it with hope and go, I know a lot of great writers. I know a lot of great writers for the church that are writing great things. When I think specifically contemporary Christian music, and then think about how people view that as Christian music, we can't speak of how dire the situation would be. Now, I say that, sorry, from a standpoint of like, if you've seen behind the big curtain of pop Christian culture, and I'm a part of pop Christian culture, a very, very
Barely.
yeah. But
You're
if
in New
you've
York.
seen behind it, you can see how there are certain players in the game that can kind of drive an industry.
Right.
So I'm sure that happened with VeggieTales. I'm sure that happens if you piss off the wrong people in Christian radio. If you, for all different types. I mean, that's every industry, but specifically the Christian.
Well, one of the issues with Christian radio is similar to the issue with retail, in that it is collapsed down to just a couple of players.
Yeah.
So Walmart can decide whether a product makes it or doesn't make it, in the same way that K-Love, and Salem can decide whether an album gets any recognition
Right.
or
So
not.
I think the hard thing is that not only comes into play with Christian radio, but then the CCLI world, which is like how we
Performance
view
rights for songs.
So
I don't even know what that is.
Okay, so CCLI is
What does it
every
stand for?
church. Well,
You have
should
your
we-
church has a CCLI
they
license.
have
Yeah.
a license,
so
so
they can
they
sing
own the
songs.
market on. CCLI is the large major thing of like if you sing a song in a church,
Okay.
you are technically supposed to be registered with CCLI.
Okay.
That's that little
You
disclaimer at
report-
the end of the worship song on the
yeah.
screen a lot of
report
times.
what songs you sing at that church, at whatever church. And then CCLI will gather all the information, and then they pay, because you pay CCLI a fee to be able to sing the songs. Then CCLI will divvy up that money and pay it to the people. Well, the pay on that is specifically because of how it's reported and like what songs. Oftentimes, church will be like, "Well, what songs is everyone singing?" If you look at CCLI and you look at Christian radio, there are certain times where that will line up. But specifically with CCLI, it's funny because the same songs will be the same top. If you look at the top 25 CCLI songs of 10 years, oftentimes there's not a ton of movement,
Right,
right?
right.
So, and then the
Our
movement
God
that you
is an
do
awesome
get,
God.
the movement that you do get, usually it's the same writers and the same players, if you would. And then the money in that is CCLI is outrageous. Where
Really?
if you wrote a top, and I feel like I'm going to probably, Gungers will get, blacklisted. It's okay. I don't have any top CCLI songs, so it's all right.
That's okay. Me neither.
The money in that is like crazy. When you get into the top 25 of CCLI, it is enough to live off of and a lot more. So you're literally talking about hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars to millions of dollars, specifically in the top 10. So let's say that you were in the top 10 for 10, 15 years. It's great for the writer in the sense of like, oh, we're songwriters, let's commission this is great. Where it gets a little dark is if you're a Christian songwriter and you know that a specific type of song will get in that top 50, the motivation becomes,
And that's
I need a top CCLI song, which is a money grab because there's a lot of money in it. And so instead of going, how do we write a song for our church congregation? He goes, how do I write a song so that everyone in the world can sing? And you're like, this is so beautiful. We're writing songs that everyone can sing. But then there's like a secondary motivation, which is how do I write a song that can get in this list?
Right.
Which once it's in the list, you're set for life. Like you're there. So there are gatekeepers, like in any industry, that once you can get certain things, it's like everything, all the money in Christian music for contemporary Christian music is in CCLI. So you can make money two ways.
Do you know the show Empire?
Yes.
Okay, about the music business. We should do a show like that about Christian worship
my gosh.
music.
Well, I
don't
think it's
know what it'd
interesting
be
because-
called, but it'd be fun.
I think
Kingdom.
this is incredibly
Kingdom instead of
enlightening in that I would be in the category of, middle-aged soccer mom kind of,
You're a lacrosse mom.
I am a lacrosse mom, but my point is, I would never understand, think about, or know any of that had you not been sitting here, and so I feel like a very uneducated way of looking at that. Ultimately, you pull the curtain back, and it's like any other business or industry.
That's right. We've talked about this before on the podcast, but you take virtually any facet of the American evangelical pop culture, and there's a business behind it. Whether you're talking about the conferences or the best-selling books, and a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them are manipulated for business interests, and you wonder, well, why are certain people on the main stage at this conference and not others? Or why is it always a megachurch pastor and never a 55-year-old pastor of a congregation of 200 in Montana that's on the main stage, even though he or she may have some wonderfully prophetic and important words for the church, because it's business driven. And the same thing's true in the music industry. So it doesn't mean that all those songs or all those books or all those speakers are bad. It just means we need to be more aware and discerning about what we're ingesting and not assume that just because they're popular, God's really behind it all.
And it does not mean that the people that write those songs are bad, because I know a very prolific writer on CCLI, and he's one of the most genuine people I know, and is full of integrity and is amazing. And he has this pastoral heart, and so I'm sure many of those writers. Here's what I'll say.
Okay.
So many of those writers on there, I don't want to paint a picture like they're bad, but I will paint the picture of, in the industry, if you're writing a song and you're like, hey, we should write a song, oftentimes the words that are thrown around are based off of CCLI drivers, which is a driver of money, which is a driver of
the same thing is true of even, bands. Someone wrote in because you complained about Christian radio last week, but we won't bring that up.
I do have my reasons.
And a few people came to the defense of Christian radio, but someone also said, but things have changed. Like the songs, I think they mentioned Sanctus Real or another band. The songs they were making 10 years ago and the songs they're making today, what's the difference? They're trying to get radio play today. Because 10, 20 years ago, there were independent Christian radio stations. There were lots of college radio stations. Lots of different genres, styles of Christian music could get radio play 20 years ago. Today, that's no longer the case because Salem and Caleb have bought.
We talked to Sarah Groves about this when she was on our podcast. She said the same thing.
Radio play either. So now suddenly I'll hear a song on Caleb that I recognize the voice, but it doesn't sound like that voice is supposed to sound. And I realize it's a band from 15 years ago that used to be more of a heavy metal, really rockin' band trying to do a single for Caleb. They're just bending over backwards to come up with something that Caleb will play so they can get on radio
and get food on their plate.
So on one end, to balance this out, the state of Christian music, specifically with churches.
Would you say it's the best of times, it's the worst of times?
Yes, I would say it's the best of times, it's the worst of times. A band that is our size, which we're not, there's going to be most of you don't have any idea who the Brilliance is.
Yeah. Now they do.
The reason why, now they do. Thank you.
You're getting the Phil Vischer bump.
Yeah, you were getting the Phil Vischer bump.
Man.
I call it the Phil Vischer pimple.
Thank you. So the reason why we can survive and make music and do what we do is because Christians are one of the only sets of people that still buy music. Okay? The music industry, so remember, Christian music industry, just like anything in Christian pop culture, is usually about 10 years behind, right?
God bless us.
So
I'm still selling DVDs.
Yeah.
Isn't that awesome?
and it's amazing. So I'm trying
Not
to say,
Blu-ray. DVD.
I still can sell certain things and do certain things with the size of our band, and people really support.
Okay.
If you look at Christian music, a lot of times with Kickstarters and stuff, people are just generous.
Yeah.
So I can't be angry at people that I want to support music. I think Christians are great at supporting Christians and great at supporting music. So I'm incredibly grateful for that. I think what's hard specifically about now the music business in general is that it's changing so much and so fast that people are scrambling. And so the only way that you can make money is either going to be through syncs, publishing, or...
Wait, syncs?
Syncs would be
synchronization fees.
Yeah, so
someone using your song on their TV show.
Yeah, which in Christian music is probably not going to happen that often.
Not that likely.
So,
although
let's get it working. Let's hope, right? So,
Super Chick
Yeah.
made a couple of singles that Disney Channel picked up and ran with.
So what I'm trying to say is, for a record label, it's hard to survive.
Yeah.
Really hard to survive. So the only way that they really can is that it's like radio.
You have to play the
And
game.
so then they, in order to survive, are I have to play this game to make sure that you sound this way.
So you go to your artist and say, man, you gotta give me a radio single.
Exactly.
So it's the homogenization, though, of Christian music, where you lose the diversity because you're all playing for
the takeaway for me. I always ask you, why should I care?
Does that mean you're leaving?
No, I'm not leaving.
Okay.
But this is the takeaway for me. First of all, I think we do have to be conscious consumers. And so now hearing this, it makes me think, okay, well, what I'm hearing on Christian radio or in my church is not all that's out there. I haven't even heard of the people that you're talking about. So now that makes me think, okay, I'm going to go out there and see what this world is I don't even know.
You know, Sky hates it when we call ourselves consumers.
And this is where like the dark empire of streaming music, which like has ruined the music industry, and yet it gives life. Like this
Like
is the best of
SoundCloud.
time.
Mm-hmm.
Like so, for instance, So like for instance, something like Spotify when it first came out. It's so complex because on one end, when it first started, we were getting, whenever someone would stream our music, we would get a quarter of a penny for a play. Okay, so people would be like, "Oh, we're not going to buy the record. Why? Because we're going to listen on Spotify." It's like,
Right.
okay, so in order to pay for like the $10 that you would pay here at this merch table, you're going to have to listen to like do the math of a quarter of a penny, right?
Right.
So on one end, you're
Did
like,
you put that up on a poster
I hate,
at your
yeah.
merch
Oh, we would
table?
say, yeah.
It's like
I would
with-
say,
with your starving children
yes,
on
exactly.
the poster.
So I would
Sponsor my
say, which I have a
children by
story
buying
for
albums.
that. I have a story for you on that. That's very entertaining. So I'll tell you that story.
Okay.
Sponsor my children. Let's talk about that later.
Okay.
So Spotify, what's interesting is they've gotten a little bit better, first of all.
Mm-hmm.
Now it might be a penny a play. I don't know what it is. It's a little better than a quarter of a
Okay.
penny. But what's interesting is we had so many fans that would come up and be like, "How did you hear about us? We discovered you on Spotify."
Mm-hmm.
They'll come up to the thing and they're like, "We listen to you all the time, and we're going to buy merch,"
Yeah.
because they wanted to, people want to support.
Right.
So it's a mixed
Order to-
blessing.
It's a that's what I'm saying.
Album
Like
or T-shirt,
either,
hats,
either.
everything
Now
else.
what's hard is we're going to be
Action
moving
figures.
as soon as cars stop having CD players, which we're very close to having, like the first cars without CD players.
Yeah.
CDs
My new
will,
car does
will be
not
gone.
have one.
See, it will be. They'll be gone. People still drive used cars and stuff like that. As soon as it's like, it'll be out. It'll be the little cassette, which is back now in fashion. The little tapes are back in fashion.
Is
If
that
you're in
because of
Brooklyn-
Guardians of the Galaxy?
If you're in Brooklyn, they literally will
Really?
be selling that at like a show. Yeah. Oh yeah.
That's hilarious.
So
With pickled
But
things.
what are people buying now? And this is great. They're buying LPs. They're buying the
buying
old
vinyl.
school vinyl
Yeah.
that are great. So like, that's awesome.
I'm
and
going
I'm
to go
totally
back
for
to
it.
selling my album on tubes of wax.
Yes,
Because it's
yes.
even more retro than vinyl.
So I love vinyl. I love it for many reasons. For part of the listening experience of like it's not it's a specific point I'm listening to music rather than just like
right.
whatever. And so I was saying all that to say the worst part of streaming music is like it can really feel like it's chopping the legs out of other people. And if you're Taylor Swift, why do you need to be on Spotify? You don't need to be.
Right.
But if you're not Taylor Swift and you're a new artist trying to like break in,
Right.
it's kind of like this thing where like you actually are kind of grateful for it because then you can find out I like this artist on Spotify. And a lot of times artists will make playlists of bands that they like and introduce you to new music.
So
and
it's like
introduce you to those
Facebook
things.
for the music world.
It is.
Kind of.
It
But
is.
So let me ask you
If
this.
you had to put your whole book up on Facebook to get it discovered, and then people
Yeah.
just read it there instead of
Yeah.
buying it in a bookstore.
So that brings me to the other thing, which is, so first of all, I feel like I need to be a more educated.
Don't say consumer.
An educated.
Purchaser of Christian music.
I wrote a book about consumerism in the
Yeah.
church. That's why she's.
Divine commodity.
Yeah.
So anyway, I need to be a little bit more aggressive.
Call it a patron.
A patron
That's
of
very
the-
nice. Yeah.
I need to be a
You need to
more
be a
educated
strategic
patron.
and educated patron.
So number one, I need to figure out, how to do that. Like, what are my tools? And you're saying Spotify is one. What are some other tools? That's the
Yeah.
first question I have for you. And the second one is, when I think about teenagers and their interest, what they do is they do kind of go behind the scenes and listen to what is not popular, and then they talk to each other about it, and then they talk about it online, and then they go to the concerts, and then all of a sudden it's their interest is pushing what ends up getting played a lot of times, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering if we began to be more educated, patrons of Christian music, could we then change the direction of what gets played
Could
on
we do
Christian
something
radio?
about Beyonce?
Here's what I would say. Part of the reason.
Could we get other
could you
interesting
change
things?
Christian radio?
Yes.
This is
that's what-
Christian's crusade against Christian radio.
I'm trying to figure out how to make Christian radio better.
I want to take one, we were at 100 feet off the ground. Like, let's take a 10,000 foot view off the ground.
Okay.
Specifically for like Christian culture and why we're behind in the times is oftentimes a direct result of education, because we're afraid of education. And so we're so fear-based that we are afraid of what's on the other side.
He's singing our song.
And so
Seriously.
And so what will happen
we
is,
say this all the time.
okay, so what will happen is with education of the arts is so many times we are afraid to show our children certain things that maybe inspired us, you know. So for my parents,
Like
they
Pink
had
Floyd, The Wall.
yeah. So my parents were like hippies that smoked a lot of pot in the 70s, and then they found did a lot of other drugs.
Okay.
But then they found Jesus. They're like Jesus people, radical like salvation. So I grew up and like they would never play. They would never play
The old
certain
stuff.
old
Right,
stuff
right,
because in some ways it represented their old life, and
Right.
so there was a certain musical education that I didn't get until later on
Right.
that then like opened my palate to things that like I really got excited about. My wife had a totally different experience where her parents were really, really great at educating things on the arts. So they grew up with a record player, listening to records and listening to things, to where she was so much more well-versed in music and different styles of music and those different types of things. And so I feel like for parents, specifically when you're like, if you want to talk about like Christian culture, I don't see Christian culture changing anytime soon. But my hope for Christian music and for Christian arts in general is that hopefully parents will then see their children and start introducing them and educating them to the arts and to music that inspires. So that happens by, showing us a great record or a great thing that you're like, this really inspired me. I'm like, wow, this is like,
Or taking them.
Or taking them to a
like
college.
I take my kids to, I'm an actress, so I
Yeah.
take my kids to the Shakespeare Theater.
Yes.
So when I take them, their minds
Is
are
it
open to this.
Christian night?
It is not.
It like Christian
It is-
skate at the skating
But
rink?
all of
'Cause
that-
was
But
the
my
only time I
point
could go
is-
skating was at Christian skate when they played Christian music.
How did
But
you
in
turn
order,
out okay at all?
in order for any of that to happen, you have to have a Christian community that
You
breaks
can't stop this.
that breaks
Put that-
down
put that
the
away.
sacred secular categories. To say that these things are sacred and good, and everything else
We
is
need
secular
our
and
fences.
bad.
Our fences keep us safe, Sky.
Well, the fences are dumb.
Yeah, so
Good
So that's where-
fences make
Fences
good
keep us
neighbors.
locked in and uneducated.
that's where I'm saying.
And they're fear-based.
I would hope that our taste in music, like we can get an education on music, we can get an education on the arts that is not fear-based and that opens us up to see even how others are experiencing music and those types of things. So that would be my great hope of like leading us out of the bubble of music. Now music in general is changing so much that's where it's like the exciting part is right now is like live shows matter again.
Yeah.
And so hopefully like we'll see where that leads us.
All right, one thing.
You got to put that ukulele away.
gotta wrap it
I know
up.
you got to wrap up, but he said he had one story about sponsoring kids or something or
Yeah,
other. That
what's
is
your
that.
Did I even answer your second question?
I don't know. It doesn't
You didn't
matter.
answer my second
So,
one either.
is that
I
a
don't know
short
these
thing, or do
questions.
we have to have him on again
Well,
sometime?
We
okay,
may
so
have to stop it and do a second
was in-
show.
Okay.
No,
What's-
yeah. So
what's-
I was in Seattle, and on this specific tour, we were opening for another band, and right after we opened, I would hustle out to like the merch table, and for 15 minutes, I had to like make all of our money, and so. I would after playing the thing, I'd hustle out there, and you're selling stuff, and
Working
you're
it,
salesman,
you're working it.
And so this particular time, it was like a huge crowd, and our credit card machine started to go off,
Oh,
and
that's
it
bad.
wouldn't work. So we had this long line forming, and I'm like really freaking out because I'm noticing the next band has now started, and now our line is moving, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm freaking out, and so I just scream in this lobby, and I just go, everyone. At the time, I had 3 children. I was like, I have 3 children at home, and I took off work to go on this tour. I was like, I know you want to see this band, and you can, so take your merch and go in there, and it's the honor system. Come back. But just know that if you take that merch and steal it, you're stealing from my children and from feeding my children. And we had the largest merch night ever.
Are you serious?
You should try that every time.
I know. Well, I know. I
guess-
guess talk about fear-based.
Yeah, that'd be a little
Not too
manipulative
much
and.
integrity. That's the
I
problem.
know.
Whoa.
Okay, I try to wrap it up with a song.
Yeah.
Since you don't, if you played the ukulele,
I know.
Maybe he could just
Think
sing
of how
us out.
different his career would be right now if instead of his brother-in-law at Carnegie Hall, he had just heard you on a ukulele.
He doesn't even want to sing
fun
now.
to imagine how the world might be different if it was me. Oh, David Gungor, he had a hunger for shredding Bach. You know, it's not just talk. He walks the walk and he says, don't fear. There's more music that your kids should hear than just the stuff on the radio that's near and dear to your little sentimental evangelical hide in the closet heart.
Oh, I love that. That was my favorite ending song ever.
Even I'm
All right.
applauding.
Wow.
David
Thank you for
Gungor,
having
thanks
me.
for coming.
Yeah, we
for having
appreciate
me.
it.
Best one of your albums for an entry point for a new
Brother.
Brother.
Go get it,
Go
everybody.
get Brother David Gungor. See you next week. Bye.
Bye.